Hello and welcome back to NPA Discovery, the place where we uncover the real, raw, and often surprising stories behind Hollywood's brightest stars. Today's journey takes us into the whirlwind life of a man whose name became synonymous with style, charisma, and a little bit of rebellion, Don Johnson. Some remember him as the effortlessly cool detective Sonny Crockett from Miami Vice. Others recall his famous romances and high-profile lifestyle. But beneath that polished exterior was a man fighting battles few ever saw. And here's the thing, this isn't just another celebrity biography. This is a story about how success can be the loudest distraction from the truth you're running from, and how sometimes, the only real victory is finding peace within yourself. So, do I agree with the idea that Don Johnson's life is a roller coaster of glamour and chaos? Yes, but I'd add that it's also a masterclass in reinvention, resilience, and the surprising places we find redemption. Before we dive in, hit that like button, share this video with anyone who loves a good comeback story, and subscribe for more deep dives into the untold journeys of famous figures. Your support gives us the fuel to keep telling these stories. Our story begins far from the flashing lights of Hollywood, in Flat Creek, Missouri, where Don was born on December 15, 1949. This wasn't Beverly Hills, this was rural America, where the idea of becoming a TV superstar was about as far-fetched as owning a Ferrari. His father worked the land as a farmer. His mother, a beautician, brought what color and creativity she could to small-town life. The family's life was humble, they didn't have much, but they had grit. And grit, as we'll see, would become Don's most valuable currency. When Don was just 6 years old, the family moved to Wichita, Kansas. And here's where something important happened, he started dreaming bigger. See, Wichita might not have been the entertainment capital of the world, but it was just big enough to give a kid a glimpse of possibility. Like many kids from small towns, Johnson wasn't handed a roadmap to stardom. But he did have one thing going for him, a taste for risk. And risk-takers rarely stay put. By 1967, he'd finished high school and enrolled in the theater program at the University of Kansas. It was a bold choice, this wasn't the safe path. But that's the thing about people destined for unconventional lives, they get restless when boxed in. Still, the academic route wasn't where his heart lay. After just 1 year, Johnson dropped out. And here's a lesson worth noting, sometimes leaving a path isn't quitting, it's recognizing that your path lies elsewhere. Instead of giving up on acting, he went where the action was, San Francisco, home to the American Conservatory Theater. This was where serious actors trained, and for a young man from Kansas, it was like stepping into another universe. The move paid off, at least at first. In 1970, Johnson landed his first film role in The Magic Garden of Stanley's Sweetheart. It was produced by an Academy Award-nominated talent, and for a moment, it seemed like his star was about to take off. But here's a harsh truth about Hollywood, a first break isn't always a lasting break. Over the next few years, Johnson worked on films like Zachariah and The Harrad Experiment. None of them brought him fame. And that's where our first real-life takeaway comes in, you can be doing all the right things and still not get the result you're chasing, the question is, do you stop, or do you keep moving? Johnson kept moving. It was on the set of The Harrad Experiment that Don's personal life took a turn that would be talked about for decades. There, he met Melanie Griffith, the teenage daughter of his co-star, legendary actress Tippi Hedren. Griffith was just 14. Johnson was 22. The age difference raised eyebrows even then, but Hedren didn't intervene. Johnson would later describe Griffith as mature beyond her years, precocious, confident, unlike anyone he'd met. Soon enough, Johnson was picking her up from high school, yes, high school, and the two began living together. It was an unconventional start, and not without drama, but it was also the beginning of a relationship that would define much of his personal life. The unlikely beginnings and the fire of ambition. Now, to truly understand the remarkable rise and resilience of Don Johnson, we have to rewind the clock to where it all began, a modest childhood in the heartland of America. Don wasn't born into the glittering world of Hollywood. His first stage was not a film set but the quiet, open spaces of Flat Creek, Missouri, where he was born on December 15, 1949. His father worked as a farmer, his mother as a beautician, hardworking, salt-of-the-earth people. It's easy to imagine young Don surrounded by rolling fields and the kind of small-town values where a handshake was as binding as a contract. But here's the thing, the kind of fire that fuels someone to eventually command the world's attention rarely stays buried in such a quiet life. Even as a boy, Don had that intangible spark, the curiosity, the need to test limits, the desire to stand out. And soon, that spark would grow into a roaring flame. When his family moved to Wichita, Kansas, Don's horizons expanded. It wasn't Hollywood, but it gave him a bigger stage, a wider view of the world. He made it through high school, and in 1967 he took a leap that would change everything, enrolling in the University of Kansas theater program. Imagine the courage it takes for a young man from a farming background to say, "I'm going to be an actor." Not a banker, not a mechanic, an actor. In the late 1960s Midwest, that was practically a declaration of rebellion. But rebellion without discipline rarely leads anywhere. Don soon realized the university route wasn't his path. After just a year, he dropped out. Now, most people would have taken that as a sign to settle down, to choose a safer path. Not Don Johnson. He set his sights on something bolder, San Francisco, and the American Conservatory Theater. Let's pause here for a real-life lesson. How many times have we been told to play it safe, to stick to the plan? Don's decision to leave the university wasn't a failure, it was a pivot. Successful people often have to step away from what isn't working before they can find what will. At the conservatory, he sharpened his craft and developed a presence, not just the physical charisma that would one day make him a household name, but the emotional range, the skill to inhabit a character fully. And before long, he got his first break, a role in the 1970 film The Magic Garden of Stanley's Sweetheart. It might sound glamorous now, but here's a truth many outsiders don't see: one role doesn't make a career. Hollywood is littered with stories of actors who got their big break and then vanished. Don was determined not to be one of them, but the early years were a grind. He appeared in Zachariah, The Harrad Experiment, and returned to Macon County. None of these turned him into a star. But in one of those projects, life took a dramatic turn, because it was on the set of The Harrad Experiment that Don met someone who would forever alter his personal life, a 14-year-old Melanie Griffith. Now, this part of the story is complicated. Don was 22 at the time, and Melanie, the daughter of Hollywood actress Tippi Hedren, was still in her teens. Their connection was immediate and intense. The public might raise eyebrows at the age gap, but in Don's eyes, Melanie was more mature than women twice her age. They began a relationship that was as passionate as it was unconventional, one that would ignite, burn bright, and sometimes burn down completely, only to spark again years later. Their love story was like a Hollywood script, intense, messy, and full of plot twists. Melanie even moved in with Don after being expelled from Catholic school at 15. For a few years, they lived like young lovers determined to defy the odds. But by 1975, the relationship had cooled, and they split, temporarily. And this is where the theme of returning to unfinished business first appeared in Don's life. Just 1 year later, Melanie called Don in the middle of the night. They professed their love again, hopped on a plane to Las Vegas, and got married. That whirlwind decision wasn't exactly the recipe for lasting happiness. In hindsight, Melanie herself admitted they tied the knot almost as a way to end the relationship cleanly. Now, here's something I find fascinating about Don Johnson's early years: he kept running into the same patterns. In his career, he kept chasing that breakout role, and in his personal life, he kept circling back to relationships that were intense but unstable. It's almost as if he was addicted to the highs and lows, both in love and in work. And when you live like that, the line between personal and professional risk gets very thin. Still, professionally, things began to shift. His role in the 1975 cult film A Boy and His Dog earned him a Saturn Award for Best Actor. But even then, Don confessed he wasn't ready for the attention. The sudden recognition unnerved him, and like so many artists who feel unprepared for the spotlight, he turned to the classic, dangerous crutch of his era, alcohol and drugs. And here's another lesson. We often think success will solve everything, that once we get the role, the promotion, the dream opportunity, happiness will follow. Don's story reminds us that success without emotional stability can be just as destabilizing as failure. By the late 70s, Don was in deep. His career had momentum, but his personal life was turbulent. Relationships came and went, with singer Tanya Tucker, actress Sally Sheridan, and others. He was looking for stability but didn't quite know how to build it. That would start to change in 1981, when he met Patty D'Arbanville. She wasn't just another romantic partner, she was about to give Don something no relationship had before: fatherhood. Fatherhood, stardom, and the Miami Vice phenomenon. By 1981, Don Johnson was no stranger to turbulence, in love, in work, and in life. But meeting Patty D'Arbanville marked a significant turning point. Patty was an accomplished actress and model who had a calm confidence that contrasted sharply with the whirlwind romances Don had been accustomed to. When Patty became pregnant with their son, Jesse Wayne Johnson, Don's life changed in a way that no acting role ever could. Holding his newborn son, Don reportedly felt something he hadn't known he was missing: a deep, grounding sense of responsibility. Parenthood has a way of reshaping priorities, and for Don, it planted the first seeds of wanting to be more than just a Hollywood bad boy with charm. But let's be clear, while fatherhood grounded him emotionally, it didn't instantly straighten out his career. Don was still hustling for roles, still navigating the unpredictable currents of Hollywood. And then came the moment that would redefine his professional life forever: Miami Vice. It's hard to overstate just how revolutionary Miami Vice was when it premiered in September 1984. Television at the time was still dominated by traditional cop shows, gritty but predictable. Then along came this neon-soaked, synth-driven, fashion-forward series that felt less like TV and more like a music video married to a crime drama. And at the center of it all, Don Johnson, in his white linen suit, pastel t-shirt, and sockless loafers, as Detective James "Sonny" Crockett. It's funny, Don wasn't even the first choice for the role. Several actors turned it down before the producers decided to give him a shot. In fact, Don was on the verge of quitting acting altogether when Miami Vice came calling. That's one of those serendipitous moments in life, where the thing you're just about to give up on suddenly comes back around with an opportunity that changes everything. The show exploded into pop culture almost overnight. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. Men copied Crockett's style. The show's soundtrack became a bestseller. Even the cars, like Crockett's Ferrari Daytona, became icons. Don's effortless cool wasn't an act, it was an extension of his own persona. And yet, behind the scenes, the demands of fame were enormous. The pressure to maintain that image, the style, the swagger, the success, was intense. There's a deeper layer here, though. In interviews, Don has admitted that Crockett was, in many ways, his alter ego, the version of himself who could walk into any room and own it. But playing that role week after week blurred the lines between character and man. When the cameras stopped rolling, Don had to reconcile the fact that Sonny Crockett might be immortal on screen, but Don Johnson was still a man wrestling with personal challenges. During Miami Vice's run, Don experienced one of the busiest, and most profitable, stretches of his career. He was suddenly a global star, gracing magazine covers, appearing at high-profile events, and even releasing a music album. But here's the paradox of fame: the higher you climb, the thinner the air gets. The workload was brutal, 14-hour days, months without a break, and the kind of constant media attention that can make privacy feel like a distant memory. Add to that the temptation of 1980s Hollywood, a scene overflowing with parties, drugs, and indulgence, and it's easy to see how maintaining balance was a daily struggle. Yet, through it all, Don kept delivering performances that gave Miami Vice its soul. Crockett wasn't just a slick cop, he was a man torn between justice and the shadows he had to walk through to get it. And maybe that's why audiences connected so deeply, because they could sense that some of that struggle was real. Patty and Don's relationship, however, didn't survive the pressures of fame. They eventually split, and Don found himself, once again, navigating love and loss while in the public eye. But the bond with his son Jesse remained strong, and fatherhood continued to anchor him, even as the bright lights of Miami Vice threatened to pull him back into old habits. And here's something worth noting for anyone listening who's chasing their own big break. Don's story shows that the moment you think you've arrived is often just the beginning of a new set of challenges. Success isn't a finish line, it's a new starting point, one that demands even more resilience than the climb that got you there. As Miami Vice neared its end in 1989, Don was faced with a daunting question: what do you do after you've played a role so iconic it's etched into television history? How do you avoid becoming a caricature of your most famous character? Reinvention, risk, and the price of fame. When Miami Vice wrapped in 1989, Don Johnson found himself at one of those crossroads that can define, or derail, a career. He'd been Sonny Crockett for 5 years, and the image of the white suit, pastel shirt, and stubble was burned into pop culture's memory. The challenge was clear: how do you move forward when the world still sees you as the guy with the Ferrari and the rolled-up sleeves? Don understood something many stars don't: reinvention isn't optional, it's survival. So instead of retreating from the spotlight, he leaned into new projects, deliberately seeking roles that would shake off the Crockett image. One of the most notable post-Vice ventures was Nash Bridges, which debuted in 1996. It was a crime drama, yes, but it had a lighter, warmer tone than Miami Vice. Don played the title role, a San Francisco cop with a sharp mind, a sharp tongue, and a bright yellow Plymouth Barracuda. The show ran for 6 seasons and became a staple of late 90s television. Here's the interesting part: Don wasn't just starring in Nash Bridges, he was producing it. This wasn't about just showing up and saying lines anymore, it was about control, vision, and building something he could shape from the inside out. That was a bold move, and it paid off, financially and creatively. But between Miami Vice and Nash Bridges, Don's life was a whirlwind. He dipped into music, releasing albums that showcased his surprisingly solid singing voice. Songs like Heartbeat earned him attention, even if critics were mixed. He also appeared in films like Harley Davidson and The Marlboro Man alongside Mickey Rourke, proving he could carry a big-screen presence. Of course, the personal side of Don's life during this era was as headline-worthy as his career. His romantic history reads like a Hollywood yearbook: his brief marriage to Melanie Griffith in the 70s, their remarriage in 1989, the birth of their daughter Dakota Johnson, yes, the 50 Shades of Grey star, and their second divorce in 1996. His connection with Dakota is one of the more touching threads in his later life. Don has spoken with pride about her career, often joking that she's the real star of the family now. But what's notable is that Dakota grew up seeing both the glitz and the grit of show business, and Don's complicated journey as a father undoubtedly shaped her resilience. Financially, though, Don's ride was far from smooth. In the early 2000s, he faced significant money troubles, including a highly publicized incident where he nearly lost his Colorado ranch due to debts. For a man who had once been one of television's highest-paid actors, it was a humbling moment. And here's where Don's story takes on a very human dimension: many stars facing bankruptcy retreat in shame or fade quietly into obscurity. Don did neither. He fought back, legally, professionally, and personally, to reclaim stability. He returned to acting in both film and television, taking on smaller roles at first but gradually reasserting his presence. Movies like Django Unchained, 2012, reminded audiences that Don wasn't just a relic of the 80s, he was a seasoned actor who could still surprise you. His role as the charmingly sinister plantation owner in Tarantino's film was a reminder of his range. And then, in the 2010s, something unexpected happened: Don Johnson became cool again. Part of it was nostalgia. Younger audiences were discovering Miami Vice through streaming and retro pop culture trends. But part of it was Don himself. He embraced the past without being trapped by it. He could make fun of his own image in interviews, appear in quirky indie films, and still command a room in a tailored suit. The truth is, few actors get to ride 2 major TV hits, Miami Vice and Nash Bridges, and still find relevance decades later. That's not just luck, that's adaptability, persistence, and a refusal to be defined by any single chapter. Yet, for all his reinvention, Don Johnson's career has always been shadowed by a deeper theme: the price of living life at full speed. Every comeback came with scars, emotional, financial, and personal. And in a way, that's what makes his story so compelling. Because unlike the effortless cool of Sonny Crockett, the real Don Johnson had to fight, not just to get to the top, but to stay there, fall, and climb again. Legacy, lessons, and the man behind the cool. By the time the 2010s rolled around, Don Johnson had nothing left to prove, but he also wasn't interested in fading into the background. Instead, he seemed to hit his stride in a whole new way, comfortable in his skin, playful with his image, and willing to work on projects that actually excited him rather than just padded the bank account. His roles in Django Unchained, 2012, and Knives Out, 2019, were prime examples. In Knives Out, he played Richard Drysdale, a charming, slightly smug patriarch who's part of a deliciously dysfunctional family. Critics and audiences loved the film, and it introduced Don to an entirely new generation who might never have seen Miami Vice. But Don's later career choices weren't just about acting. He started doing something that's rare in Hollywood: embracing humility. In interviews, he was self-deprecating, willing to poke fun at his own past excesses, and refreshingly candid about his missteps. In one conversation, when asked about his 1980s fame, he joked, "Yeah, I was a big deal back then, until I wasn't." That's showbiz. It's the kind of line that only works if you've made peace with the highs and lows. And that's the key to Don Johnson's enduring appeal: he never pretends the falls didn't happen, but he also never stops climbing back up. Family has played a huge role in that stability. His daughter Dakota Johnson has become one of Hollywood's leading actresses, and their public interactions are often warm, teasing, and deeply genuine. In fact, Dakota once joked on a talk show that her dad still tries to give her cool lessons, as if she needed them. But behind the jokes, you can sense the pride. Don has said that watching Dakota succeed, on her own terms, has been one of the most rewarding experiences of his life. It's a reminder that while fame and fortune may come and go, the bonds you build with your family can anchor you in ways nothing else can. Financially, he's bounced back, too. After the turbulence of the early 2000s, Don became more disciplined about his work and investments. The Colorado ranch he once nearly lost. He kept it, a symbol of resilience, stubbornness, and maybe a touch of cowboy grit. Today, Don Johnson stands as one of those rare entertainers who has managed to straddle multiple eras of Hollywood without becoming irrelevant. He's been the breakout star, the TV legend, the chart-topping musician, the comeback kid, and now, the elder statesman of cool. So, what's the lesson in Don Johnson's story? It's that style might open the door, but substance keeps you in the room. And in his case, the substance is a mix of work ethic, adaptability, and the ability to laugh at yourself even when the world isn't laughing with you. In an industry obsessed with youth and reinvention, Don Johnson has done something even more impressive: he's stayed himself, evolving without erasing his past. The Sonny Crockett swagger is still there, but now it's tempered by wisdom, humility, and a kind of grounded confidence that only comes after you've been through the ringer and survived. So whether you know him from the pastel suits of Miami Vice, the easy grin of Nash Bridges, or the sharp wit of Knives Out, one thing's clear: Don Johnson's story isn't just about a Hollywood career, it's about a man who's lived every chapter to the fullest, learned from the messiest pages, and still managed to close the book with a smile. And maybe that's the real secret to cool: not the car you drive, the suit you wear, or the role you play, but the way you carry yourself when the cameras are off, the crowds have gone home, and it's just you, looking back at a life fully and fearlessly lived.